Good afternoon. Good afternoon. This is Dr. Martha Simmons with another session of Preaching and Preachers on Facebook Live via Restream. Come on in and let me know that you are out there to make sure people can. Yeah, there we go. Give folk a few minutes to come on in as we begin our Black History Month series of broadcast. Shout out to Black History Month. Uh, as someone I know says, it begins on February 1st and ends December 31st. Uh, so we are definitely doing Black History Month and glad for our wonderful guests that we will have all month long. I'm not doing any talking, leading anything during February. We have great guests who will do that. Come on in and let me know that you are out there. And when you come in, tag another person, let them know they can get on right now, or this will be up on my page for 2 weeks until they can watch it in their leisure. Shout out to my people on the West Coast who get up early in the morning and watch this broadcast. Shout out to the folk in the Midwest, East Coast, and certainly the Dirty South. Shouting out all the people. I see folk coming in. All right, the Double Love Experience is in the house. They are in the house. Come on in, people, and let me know that you are out there. It's a very sunny day here in Atlanta. I think they're talking about it being about 65 degrees. And so we love it. We are just loving that. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. I see people coming in slowly but surely. Give folks just a few more minutes. Just a few more minutes. All right. All right. Yes. We're getting just a little bit of feedback. Uh, there we go. Okay. Zandra Taylor from the Room Church. Good to have you with us. All right. All right. All right. All right. We got the folk coming in.
I got to greet one of my ministers. Reverend Fee is on. Good
All right.
afternoon, Reverend Fee. That's a Fee
All right.
aside right there.
All right. All right. All right. Good to have you with us. All right. I'm getting let's see, am I hearing just a little bit of feedback? Okay. Deborah Carpenter. Okay. All right. All right. Good to have you with us. And when you come in, tag someone, type in the name of another person who you know would benefit from this broadcast. They can watch it right now, or they can be up on my page for 2 weeks. They can watch it in their leisure. We're going to go ahead and get started. As always, let us pray for those who are sick. Let us pray for those who are experiencing a season of bereavement. Let us pray for those who are being rounded up and removed from the country, and especially for those whose life sustaining benefits are being removed or delayed. We are praying for leaders with courage who have plans and are helping us fight back. I think I'm getting a bit of an echo, so I'm going to ask my guest to turn your mic off. Uh, yeah, okay, yeah. So I don't usually have to do this, but we're going to have to mute and unmute. So sorry about that, but something is causing an echo, and see, we just got rid of it. We just got rid of it. Yeah. We are all good now. All right. All right. Let me do a couple of announcements. Again, happy Black History Month. And we're going to celebrate it. Celebrate it hard. Celebrate it hard. If you've never celebrated it hard before, celebrate it hard this year. Then please join me next Monday to discuss creating curriculums for children in Black churches. That is so, so important. So please join me for that. And then on February the 17th, join me for a discussion of LGBTQIA issues. Okay. Looks like we've still got the someone is saying it might be on my end. Okay. All right. All right. I think we're good. Let's get started. Today we want to talk about church planting. Church planting. And churches began in the first place because someone planted them. Every church did. Some of our most known and revered churches were planted by individuals often connected to denominations. So many preachers I know revered Charles Spurgeon. Spurgeon planted more than 200 churches in Europe. And in the late 1900s, in a major way, churches were planted by individuals who did not connect them to denominations. They no longer connected them to denominations. So instead of First, Second, and Third Baptist, you got the Church Without Walls. You've got the Crenshaw Christian Center. Okay. All of these churches are non-denominational. And so we've always had church plants. But church planting is definitely not for the faint of heart. And in difficult times like these, we want to talk about how people do it, whether it works. I think I'm getting the feedback again. Is everyone muted? Okay, then we're going to get through it. So let me today present three folk who are just in the thick of church planting. And so, one of our guests is still in the midst of planning. They actually will launch in September. Then we've got another one who just moved into their building as a church plant late last year. And then we've got a guest who's been doing it for a minute. So they figured out some stuff. My first guest is the Reverend Kevin Alston Jr. He is a leader, a preacher, and a student, but most of all, a servant of God. He was raised by his grandmother, Deacon Gloria McPherson, in Mebane, North Carolina. Pastor Alston, from a young age, has always had a heart for people. This led him into the educational field. He works as an ISS coordinator and graduation assistant in Almanac, Burlington County Schools. He holds an associate's degree in biblical studies. He served in preaching ministry for almost 10 years. He's licensed as a missionary Baptist preacher and in the United Holy Church of America. And he has served the North Carolina General Baptist State Convention, and he served United Holy Church of America. And he's had the privilege of preaching for both. And he's the proud founder and lead pastor of New Journey Church located in Mebane, North Carolina, launching September 2025. All right, all right. Next, we have Reverend Dr. Genetta Hatcher. She is known as the preacher in blue jeans. That's how I first heard about her, was the preacher in blue jeans. And she says that she believes if Jesus was around today, Jesus would be wearing blue jeans. Okay. Dr. Hatcher loves preaching and honors preaching. Her love affair with preaching began in Orrville, Alabama, where she would sit at her grandmother's knee on Sunday mornings listening to Reverend C.L. Franklin on the record player. Didn't we all? No, not the young ones, but we did. We did. She has had a vast professional career. She served AT&T in numerous positions for more than 35 years. And then she became, after she retired from that, she began serving Ecumenical Theological Seminary in Detroit. She spent some time there as the vice president of operations and administration. She was also their first seminary pastor. She faithfully served the New Hope Baptist Church in Detroit under Pastor E.L. Branch for I think almost 40 years she was there. She sits at the table of several local and national ministries. She earned her BA from Spring Arbor University with a focus on management. She earned both the MDiv and Doctor of Ministry degree from Ecumenical Theological Seminary. She is the proud founding pastor of the Room Church, which officially launched September 2021. And as I said, most recently, they were blessed to purchase their first worship space after just 2.5 years. She's doing it. She is doing it. Last but not least, we have Reverend Dr. Gabby Wilkes and her husband, Dr. Andrew Wilkes, wanted to be with us, but could not due to a major complication. But we want you to know, Andrew, we're thinking about you and still praying for you after your recent loss in your family. They lead the Double Love Experience Church in Brooklyn, New York. They're also the co-authors of Psalms for Black Lives, Reflections for the Work of Liberation. Dr. Gabby is a public theologian with over 15 years of experience working at the intersection of faith, culture, leadership, and strategy. With over 15 years of experience working at the intersection of public policy, she and her husband are drum majors for justice. Between the two of them, their work has been featured in Forbes, Faith and Leadership, the Washington Post, Stanford Social Innovation Review, the New York Times, Essence Magazine, and in other publications. They were both inducted into the Martin Luther King Board of Preachers at Morehouse College in 2022. Dr. Gabby is the current vice president of the Yale University Divinity School Alumni Board. And she is, and Andrew, they're both graduates of Hampton. Dr. Gabby is a graduate of New York University, Yale Divinity School, and she received the D-Min from Duke Divinity School. All right. So we got everybody. Let's get to the questions. If you are on, tag someone. Type in the name of someone you know will be helped by this broadcast. They can get on now, or it'll be up on my page for 2 weeks, and they can watch it in their leisure. I think I'm having a few technical issues, but I don't think my guests are having any. So we're going forward. Let's start with Dr. Hatcher. Dr. Hatcher, Tell us about your work inside and outside of ministry.
Thank you, Dr. Simmons. I'm so glad to be here with almost Pastor Kevin and Dr. Gabby. As I heard your bio, I thought we were cool. I don't know whether I like you anymore. That's wonderful, the stuff that you've done. But my work, I spent a lot of years in corporate, AT&T, in various leadership roles. And during that time, I served one church for close to 40 years, actually 35, 36 years, working in various capacities. And the Lord used us and grew us up right in the church. And I was one of my loving roles was campus pastor at Third New Hope at their West campus under Dr. Branch. And so just certain women's ministry, Christian education, you name it in the church, I've done it. I often tease and say that, the church, in many ways became my husband, because when the doors were open, I was there serving and working. And I look back now and realize what God was doing. And so it's been a well-spent life serving and in ministry and doing various capacities in corporate as well. We talked about already my role as vice president operations at Ecumenical Theological Seminary. I say God has given me some hard roles, but I understand now in church plant what God was doing.
All right. Reverend Alston, tell us about your previous work in and outside of ministry.
Yeah, so super excited to be here today and to be on with all of these wonderful panelists. Very privileged and honored to be here. My background in the secular world, I am an educator at heart. I started off as a substitute teacher, moving my way up to becoming a behavior specialist. I've worked for a few districts in the state of North Carolina, and I currently work as an ISS coordinator and graduation coach assistant at a high school in Alamance Community College. Alamance Community, excuse me. In reference to ministry-wise, I've been very fortunate. My team made me aware that last year made 10 years. I thought we were coming up on 10 years, but 10 years being licensed in the gospel. I started out in the Missionary Baptist Church, where I served as an associate minister, youth pastor, senior associate minister, then assistant pastor, then interim pastor of a church. And then I progressed my way to the oldest Black Pentecostal church in the world, the United Holy Church of America, and have been very fortunate within that denomination to be able to serve our great church. And so here we are launching a church. And so that's a little bit about my history. I've been fortunate enough to be able to travel our country and even outside of our country. I'm bringing forth the word of God. So just very thankful about what God is doing and super excited for this conversation today.
All right. Dr. Gabby, tell us about it. Tell us about some of your previous work and some stuff you've done in ministry.
Sure, for sure. First of all, Doc, I want to celebrate you for 8 years of doing this work for us at no charge, with all of your expertise. I just want to honor you and thank you for always making space for critical conversations that seminary does not always bring to us. And so it's a whole lot of folks with a whole lot of degrees, but we figured out how to do ministry in many ways because of this broadcast. So just thank you. Listen, before congregational ministry, I kind of got tricked into ministry. The Lord just kind of, I don't know how it happened. I will say this. I moved to New York City to be a publicist. I was a publicist for 10 years, went to NYU for my master's of music business right out of Hampton. Was doing very well, was working with lots of major companies and many artists that I was just a fan of, that God blessed me to be a publicist for. Here's where God tricked me. So when I moved to New York, of course, I've been raised in the church, reared in the church, love the Lord, and always very serious about my faith. So I wanted to find a church that I could be at least receive from in New York, even if I couldn't serve. And so I found a church that ironically had Bible study on Friday nights for young adults, which would be a turnoff for everybody else who was in the streets on Fridays. But because I was a publicist and because I was an A&R and scouting, I was in shows every night of the week. I'm talking about from Sunday night through Sunday. And so I could miss a Friday because I was at a show Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, you know. And so I got excited about that and started making my trek from Harlem to Queens for a Bible study on Friday nights at the Greater Allen Cathedral of New York. And they found out I was a promoter. And I would come in, sit in the back, leave, didn't know anybody. But they were planning a New Year's Eve event for their young adults. They had a major budget, but didn't have folks who were young adults who knew what they were doing and could raise their hand and say yes. And so I didn't really raise my hand to say yes. Somebody heard that I was a promoter, and all of a sudden I got asked to help. And
they raised your hand for you.
I was voluntold, as we do in the Black church. And so I raised my hand after I was voluntold in 2008, just to be a support to the work that was already going forth. And, you know, for the next 5 years, I was a lay leader without meaning to be, and then got called into ministry at that same church 5 years later, ended up becoming a co-young adult pastor with my husband in 2013 at that church. And that was my that was my yes to ministry. Went to divinity school in 2015. Dropped my PR clients in 2015.
Whoa.
And have been on that journey. And so God tricked me. I was just trying to go to church while doing my other work. And the Lord used an event to get me connected and plugged into ministry work. And it just stole my heart. And here I am. So I have no regrets, but I have a lot of jokes and chuckles about how God did it. That somehow I moved to New York to do PR. And now I'm doing church in New York, which nobody moves. Newsflash, nobody moves to New York to do church. But God has been kind. So here we are.
Yeah. We're familiar with God arranging things. That we were going in one direction, and God was bringing us towards our destiny. And it didn't make sense at the time. But God has the final say and the best say. All right. So as we think about church planting, Dr. Hatcher, in addition to, the belief that God told you to do it, in a time when churches are shrinking around the world, and I mean around the world, they talk about, some churches growing in Africa and a few in South America, but for the most part, especially in America, churches are shrinking, and they have been for almost 10 years. And you all can go online. You ain't got to take my word for it, and just look at the feed, and you will see difference in numbers. You will see the grand difference. Now, we always got that 1%, the mega churches who are doing okay, but for the most part, churches are shrinking. So with that in mind, Dr. Hatcher, what made you believe that you should plant a church?
Yeah, it's a question that I asked probably for 5 years, because if I'm to be honest, before I actually planted the church, it was something that was always in my spirit. And at the church where I was at, some of the elderly members would come that are now gone on to glory and just say what they feel the Lord is saying. But there are a lot of dynamics based on respect and honor that I would not move, and honestly did not want to do it. Can I just be very clear? I did not want to do it for all of those reasons. I did not want to be a Black woman. I did not want to be that cliche that Black women have to start church as a pastor. I never pursued positions. And so whatever I did, the Lord just handed it to me because he trusted me in that season. And I would probably say the same thing for starting a church. The Lord trusted me with it, even as it's not something that I never had to have pastor on my name. I just never had to have VP on my name. I really always just like, Lord, I just want to be faithful. As I was moving and Lord had called me to leave everything, my former church that I'd been at for years, I'll walk away from the vice president role because he said my work there was finished. Very hard, because it's like, well, that's two incomes here. What are we doing? Didn't get all of that. And I didn't know what the Lord was doing, but at the same time I did. I even had the name It was called Rehoboth. I'm flying to Africa and I look and see there's a Rehoboth, right? And so it's just a lot of different things that was happening. And then I tried to run from some of the people, and I like almost Ruth told, Naomi told Ruth and Orpah, just can you, go on back, but I kept coming. And one of my friends that pastors, does great ministry in Houston, said, the sheep know the voice of their shepherd. So I kept talking to people. I mean, some giants here in the city, everybody called it out, but I did not want to do it because I knew it was hard work. And I had, a grandiose scheme of getting married and soaking my feet in the water. But I knew the Lord was calling me to this work. And when it comes to church planting, we're not trying to go after and regurgitate necessarily members. I was at funerals and someone said, I just knew you were going to be my pastor. Some of the members that are there came up and said, you were over here. And at some point I said, if she ever pastors. So the Lord had already started to orchestrate some stuff. And at some point I knew one church the Lord had me to apply for. It was the only church that I felt he told me to apply for. And I did not get it. And then that night I said, I wasn't even disappointed because I didn't want to do the work, but I want to be obedient. Sat in my closet and said, okay, Lord, now what? I wasn't devastated. And Rehoboth was not registering with me. He says, the room church, now there's room for you. And I was ready to go after that.
All right. So Reverend Alston, I mean, you're a young man, you keeping up with the data. You see what's going on around you. And so why are you launching? I mean, you got a whole team of folk working with you on this. Why are you launching a church this fall?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I think one of the main things, and I'll share a little backstory briefly, I've always been against the concept. I have shared that, as long as I've been preaching. And I've even oftenly said that the issue was not that we needed new churches. The issue was that we needed new leaders. And I had said that for a while. And very similar to Dr. Hatcher, I had my name in a couple of churches. And I actually had positive responses from these churches who wanted me to come and pastor them. However, the issue was every church that wanted me to come and pastor them, the Lord just did not show me that church for me to be at. And so because of that, I ended up going through a pretty interesting season in 2023, which is when God gave me this vision of launching. It happened in January. I'll never forget. I literally wrote up the whole vision in a night, literally. And I put it to the side, never opened it again. And throughout that year, the Lord began to deal with me. And I even had the opportunity to be introduced to a church in Greensboro, North Carolina, which is a church plant, and be interested in or introduced rather into like this concept of church planting, because I've always had a negative kind of thought around it. And as we'll get later down, having that idea like who split the church, however, was introduced to a different concept. I was introduced into a different scope of it. And so in a day and time when churches are in a sense depleting and we are losing attendance, a lot of times in our local churches, it is a difficult task. However, I believe, and I firmly do believe this, that in a day and time, people need something. People need something. Now, what that something is going to be is depending on a lot of things, our environment, what they're introduced to. But people are longing for something after COVID. I really do believe that. And so in this day and time and in the area that I'm in, which has influenced it a lot, because this is actually an area that I wanted to move away from, and had actually took another job in another city and was going to get out of this, this area that I grew up in, right? So that adds a whole nother dynamic that this is a city that knows me and I know them, right? However, I really do believe that in this day and time, that people are looking for a different outlet, a different version of church, right? A lot of people have been introduced to one version, and people are interested in something else in a sense. And so that has really kind of piqued me and brought me back around. And I preached a revival at the end of 2023 in this area. And we were fortunate enough to have testimony service. And it was one of the first times I think I had witnessed young adults testifying. It was very, very interesting concept, and then we stayed, and we didn't leave that church until like midnight, because we just stayed and had conversations. Like, we were having conversations, and that is one thing that prompted me and said, you know what? The concept that people don't want to go to church, I'm not going to debate one way or another. However, I've always shared that the issue, I don't think, is that people don't necessarily want to go to church. Just sometimes they don't want to go to our church.
Okay. Dr. Gabby, nobody goes to New York to start a church. So what were you thinking?
So why do we do it? Yeah. So, I will say this. I've been very clear about this. My ministry has really been, I like to say that I'm always interrupted by an invitation. So many times when God does something in my ministry, it's because God has used someone that I trust, who has invited me into something that they believe is a good fit. And then I take it to God and see if God says the same. So church planting is in the same bucket. When I was in divinity school, I was the president of our Black seminarian group. And one of our alumni, he's now deceased. His name is Tony Campbell, Reverend Tony Campbell. He was a class of 85 Yale Divinity School alum. He was in the senior leadership of a denomination. Their denomination was dying. And so he had come to Yale with the intention of recruiting Black and brown leaders. He wanted to start at his divinity school, then he was going to move around and recruit other folks. And his denomination had decided they had a whole lot of land, a whole lot of property. They had staff, but they were dying out. And so he had introduced an initiative where he was going to be recruiting folks that he thought were capable of leading these kinds of churches. But he was going to supply them with 5 years of salary, with a building for the church, and a parsonage for 5 years. And they would put everybody that they thought should be an applicant for that. They put us through testing and the like. When he came, I was literally just opening up space for him to talk to our seminarians, because I had a job. At that time, I was on staff at a church in New York. And so I had a job. I wasn't thinking about it. I'm trying to open up a door for my other seminarians who I know are looking for work. And after we had that conversation with YBS, he pulled me to the side. He said, "Now, why aren't you applying?" I said, "Well, I got a job." He said, "Well, are you called the pastor?" Because at the time I was a young adult pastor. I said, "Probably so, down the line." He said, I need you to apply for this." "No, thanks, I'm good." Fast forward, probably about a month or so ago, he said, I went ahead and pulled your resume and sent it to my folks anyway. They really don't even need you to apply. They just want you to take our church planting assessment test, just to test your skills. I said, "All right, fine." I told them about my husband. I was like, "Listen, I do ministry with my husband. So if you want me, you want both of us." That's another broadcast for another day, Doc. We got to talk clergy couples. But in that, they said, fine. They took his resume. They said same thing, tested us. Our assessment, according to what they believed was necessary to plant churches well, was off the charts. And so they ended up offering us the opportunity to be the New York plant. 2 weeks before we were supposed to begin that work, Dr. Campbell dropped dead on the treadmill. And when he died, all of that organization, all of that planning, all of those dreams went with him to the grave, because his staff trusted him, but the rest of his staff was white, and they did not understand how to implement what this Black man with 30 years of standing had in that denomination. But whenever I tell the story of how I got into church planting, I promise the Lord I will always speak this man's name, because I never had any intention to plant. I was working. I had a check. I had a good salary. I respected my pastors. I had a lot of leadership experience. I was good. But what God allowed Dr. Campbell to do, I believe, is to open my eyes to another possibility with a safety net. Because once I had, 5 years salary, building, and parsonage, now I feel like I'm applying for a church as opposed to starting a church. But once he died, all of that went with him. But what remained in me was the curiosity and the possibilities about planting. And that never left me. And so that was the seed. I can tell you, when I did launch, wasn't no money, wasn't no help, wasn't no stat, none of that. None of that came our way. But I do believe that God used Tony Campbell to awaken me to something that God was calling both me and my husband to, that the comfort of where we were probably would have never had us even explore. And so I always speak his name.
And what was his denomination?
Reformed Church of
Yeah.
America,
Yeah.
and they had a dual. It was going to be a dual appointment with the United Church of Christ. So
Yeah.
RCA,
Okay.
UCC.
Yeah.
Um,
I was aware. I'm UCC, so I knew where you were going.
yeah.
And uh, Dr. Campbell was a giant.
Yes, you knew. Okay, of course you knew him. Yes, we
Yes.
speak his
Yes.
name and we honor him.
Yes. Amen. Amen. And I wish more folk knew about, especially the way he set up assessments.
Mhm.
People didn't understand the genius behind
Yes.
that work. But anyway, that's a story for another day. But yes, we definitely honor his name. So let's talk a little bit about context, because that's the other thing that people wrestle with. If you're going to plant a church, do you do it in the inner city? Do you do it in the suburbs? I've seen a lot of people say, if I'm planting something, I'm definitely going to the suburbs. Do nobody says I'm going to do it in a rural area, but context matters. Context matters. So, Dr. Hatcher, you did yours.
Mhm.
Either was it in the inner city or near the inner city?
Yeah, we started meeting at Martin Luther King High School. And so that's where we were at before the Lord moved us to our current location. And so I wanted to stay in Detroit. I was kicking and screaming when it appeared that the Lord was leading us to this particular church that was vacant. I remember calling my bishop and talking to other people, and like, I don't want to go here. It's right outside of Detroit, but it wasn't Detroit. And I wanted Detroit because I felt that the Lord had given us grassroots ministries, kind of open door ministries, those that other folks don't want, right? There's room for you here at the Room Church. But it became very clear. And I remember my bishop saying that, all of my staff live out in Macomb, which is a county. And pretty much there's enough churches here in Detroit. And even before then, the Holy Spirit has said the same thing. I'm sending you where I want to send you. And where we're at is a very diverse community. It allows us to do the type of ministry. So we tied the 10th, right? And so in the fact that we just had our church meeting, this is not bragging on us, it's bragging on God, that we tied the 10th over $35,000 last year. So our ministry is dynamic because we give more than we take. We want to come into the community being a giver. And the Lord placed us right in a community that I'd never thought about, that's very diverse, and allows us to indeed say, hey, here, there's room for you and you and you.
Yeah.
And also,
so Reverend Alston, is Mebane, is that a rural area? Is it, would people say you're in the country? Where is Mebane?
I think it depends on what part of Mebane you're in, right? But for the most part, they would deem this more of a country area in a sense. So very interesting demographic. We lie between two really big cities in our state of North Carolina, Greensboro and Raleigh. We're about dead smack in the middle of both of them. So, it's about a 30-minute drive, 35-minute drive, give or take, from Greensboro, about a 40 to 45-minute drive from Raleigh, right? So such an interesting area. To attack this question in reference to choosing, I think you got to know where your influence lies. So you got to know where your influence lies.
Okay.
I think that's important. So the area that we were looking at, like I said, I wanted to kind of step out of this area. However, I couldn't, in a sense, neglect the fact that I knew I had influence in this area. And so because of that, I knew that, as we're launching off of the ground and not currently a part of or launching out of an affiliation, that it was going to be, extremely difficult in a sense to go to a city that none of us have history in and hit the ground, right?
Okay.
And so that's kind of how we ended up here in Mebane.
Yeah. So Dr. Gabby, I mean, we know, about you and New York. So I'm going to ask you something different in terms of setting things up. Tell me about, because I don't know whose machine's going off. Tell me about your learning experience. You've been doing this the longest of the guests today. What's been your main learning experience since you became a church planner? Is it how much time is required to do it, the amount of money you need, the time you need to build leaders or train a kind. What? Tell me, what's your main experience?
Yeah, consistency. I
Hmm.
want to say to anyone who is starting a church, be consistent. We have had seasons where there was nobody in the pews
Hmm.
and everybody was online. We have
Okay.
had seasons where everybody was in person and nobody was online.
Yeah.
We have had seasons where nobody was online and nobody was in person.
Yeah.
If I can just be blunt.
Yeah.
And what I have learned on this journey is that sometimes God will call you to a particular area because the people are there and they're hungry and they're interested. Look, my digital minister is here, Rev Ev. She said, I'm a witness. Yep, because she was doing that stream and she was a witness to all seasons. But sometimes God calls you to an area and it's because it's ripe and the folks are ready. Other times God calls you to an area because the area needs to know you exist so that when they need you, they can find you. And I
Huh.
want to say this really clearly. Double Love is the kind of church that people know we exist, but they only come to us when they need us. They
Hmm.
come to us when crisis breaks out and they want that social justice sermon that we've been preaching, but now they need it differently. They
Mm-hmm.
come to us when they've been in another setting that is denying their blackness, because our mantra is we are a Jesus movement for Black lives. We are unapologetic. Look, we are unapologetically committed to who we are as Black Christians, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's a hard thing for church planting because it does not equate to raising a whole lot of money,
Mm.
does not equate to being able to buy our own building yet, does not equate to our numbers skyrocketing and having this story of we started at 5 and now we're at 5,000. But we're clear that God called us to this moment, to this community. We're in the heart of Bed-Stuy, on Fulton and Marcy.
Mm-hmm.
And we are clear that because we are consistent, folks know how to find us when they need us. It does
All
not
right.
help my ego at all. But I know that we have done what we're supposed to do, and our
Mm-hmm.
metrics of how we measure impact have to be beyond numbers and membership, because for us it has not been that. And we had the opportunity, Pastor Andrew and I had the opportunity 2 years ago to speak at story time at IC3 in Houston. Huge conference, Pastor
Mm-hmm.
Ralph Douglas West, main
Mm-hmm.
stage to tell the story of our church. And I'll tell everybody, I was so nervous because I was like, Lord, I'm in front of all these mega church pastors. I used to serve a mega church. I
Mm-hmm.
know what we're listening for, and we
Yeah.
don't have the metrics they're listening for. And
Mm-hmm.
God was like, just tell the story of faithfulness. And can I
Yeah.
tell you the number of mega church pastors that reached out to us, understanding and being encouraged by the consistency? Because let me tell you something, whether you have 10,000 members or 100, everyone has seen a decline. So if we
Everyone.
talk percentages,
That's right.
the percentage of decline has impacted everyone. I sat in
Everyone.
mega church meetings and we saw the same percentage of decline that I see in my church. I just have a smaller number of folks, so I feel it
Yeah.
differently.
Yeah.
But we all feel it. And so I say to everyone, whether you have been blessed to have thousands of members or blessed to have 10, 15, 20, 100 members, be consistent.
Be consistent. I like that. All right. All right. That's a major piece. Dr. Dr. Hatcher, what's been your main learning experience?
And can I say, Dr. Gabby, thank you. You blessed me because people always want to go and talk about the numbers. I keep up with metrics because that's my administrative skills, but I don't stay there. And the Lord does the work that He is doing through the room church with very small numbers, and I'm so cool with it until the Lord adds whatever increase. But you blessed me because I was there when you and your husband did story time, and so I think for me, it's just when you start anything. I just told my church this past Saturday, it's almost like your first child. They tell me, right? Because it's you really are the brain behind everything. If something doesn't get done, you have to do it. You're thinking about marketing. You're thinking about next. While if you lose a musician or
Yeah.
worship leader, you're the
Yeah.
one that now have the
Yeah.
responsibility of trying to get someone else. Why some people your members may lament, I liked him or whatever, and you're like, okay, I'm gonna let you cry, but I gotta find somebody else. And so you have to know that if it was working, then we
Yeah.
wouldn't be
Yeah.
here because it's more work. I mean, so I think just every aspect of it. And I thank God for a good team. But at the end of the day, the amount of mental energy that has gone into this, and that still does when everyone else is sleeping, you're up thinking. Because I always say to God, I don't want to fail you. I don't want to fail the people that you've sent. I don't want to fail the community that you sent me. So sometimes that keeps
my goodness. That's faithfulness. That Pastor Alston. So you're launching. You're getting ready. You're looking at metrics. You're etc. What's been in this season as you look toward the fall? What's been the main thing you've been dealing with?
I would say the biggest initial learning I'm experiencing that I'm currently and was starting to battle with, but I've currently locked into it is patience. I think that one of the hardest things for us to do is see where God has taken us, but have to deal with where we are right now. And that has kind of been, I have this vision, I have this concept, I have this wonderful vision from God, right? But now I got to deal with currently where I'm at. So patience has been the biggest one because, we all would love a church full of people, but I've been sharing with my team, do we have the system in place to handle a church full of people right at this moment, right? Mm-hmm. And so a lot of it has been, to be patient, and to echo what Dr. Gabby said, people are going to come and people are going to leave, right? Like this month for Bible study, we've been keeping up. And I think for this month, we've had somewhere around the numbers of 30, right? Some weeks that's 20, some weeks that's 40, some weeks that's right 30. We did a virtual one time. Next thing you know, I was believing, we're going to have 40 to 50 people on this virtual. We had, I think, 10, 11 people on this virtual Bible study, right? So it's really this patience level to say, we may have a timetable, but we all know that sometimes God throws our timetable out the window, right? And so we have been very flexible. And I think that's another learning thing that I've had to be flexible. We don't own our space that we're meeting at right now. Some days we show up and that space is prepared and ready for us. And then some days we show up and we got to get that space ready for us, right? So that flexibility to be able to say, and I'm very blessed and shout out to my team that has jumped on this journey with me, new journey, because it is a journey, right? And it's a hard and it's a tedious journey. But it's been good. Another thing I would say that we have been trying to be very intentional about, and it's something that I learned actually coming from another church and having some experience at a church plant that had planted and learning about that church, is setting culture. No matter whether we have 2 people or whether we have 20 people or whether we have 100, but setting culture, right? And shout out to Pastor Bill Russell from Harvest City Church in Greensboro, because one thing that he always says, and I love this quote, is that culture is what you tolerate and culture is what you celebrate.
That's right.
And that has really been something that we've been trying to put in place, and just kind of practice these things that we're going to want to keep in our church. Because right now, what I've been echoing to a lot of the members that have already joined, we're fortunate. We really are that 18 people joined our church at a Bible study, right? Like we are fortunate about that, right? Now, the question is, I've only seen 8 of them since then, right? So it's that patience and it's that flexibility to say, I started a vision and I initiated a conversation with our team that said, I want this to be a church where people can give church another chance. In order for this to be a place where people can give church another chance, I have to be able to say, okay, I can't beat you over the head because you didn't come to Bible study again, right? I got to reach out. I got to hold accountability. But at the same time, we're getting unchurched people and we're getting people who are considering church for a second opportunity. So patience has been my biggest because, I came up in churches where, mama went to this church, grandma went to this church. This is our church. This is where we go, Right. So there was no doubt that we were going to be there. So I think patience and flexibility have been really just the biggest.
That's real good. So even before you fully launch doing Bible study, and having people to join, all of that's great. But Dr. Hatcher, when when Black folk especially talk about church plants, often some take it as a negative, that a church plant is a split, or that a person started a church because nobody would call them as the pastor. There's always some extra narrative going
Help
on.
us.
So it would seem that our vision as Black folk about church plants needs a new lens. It needs a new lens. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Kerry Newhoff, I keep up with him, and he tries to, be culturally sensitive most days.
I like Kerry.
Most days. So I read an article, and I'm going to get this wrong because I don't have the exact data, but he talks about that over the next 5-10 years, the number of church plants there will need to be in order to keep up with the churches that are shrinking or closing. Sometimes as a Black culture, we look at the churches that are thriving, and usually we think thriving is numbers. But we're not looking at all of the churches around us that only have just a few people there. So that's one. The other thing is that our mindset have to shift, because some cultures, Paul says some people, he was in Roman confinement. He said, hey, some people are preaching the gospel as a result of I'm being here pretty much because they trying to get one up on me, or they trying to, take my platform. He said, I don't care as long as Jesus is being preached. And so I think that our mindset have to shift. At some point, the Lord said, stop explaining me. And I said, ooh, okay. Because I was explaining, well, she wanted that church. That wasn't true. So a lot of narratives that we have out there about why people plant churches, it has to be bigger than me and you and Kevin and Dr. Gabby. It has to be about what we think God is saying at this time in this community for us. Someone said to me not long ago, God, what if we hadn't planted the room? This would have happened. That wouldn't have happened. Now, God probably could have gotten it to happen another way. But I'm very sensitive to the fact that there are some things happening that are distinct to the room church that the Lord has called us to do. And it's not a cliche. It's nobody's mad or angry. We mad or angry because you keep saying we're mad or angry. This is the move of God. And it's ultimately about Jesus and can we make a difference in his kingdom. If that's the case, let's do it. But ain't nobody mad.
And I understand, and I know preachers who got put out of churches and started a church.
Yeah.
I know preachers who couldn't get a church and started a church. But that need not be the main narrative. That need not be the main narrative. Okay. And so I think we need a new lens, especially in this era. We need a new lens to talk about this. So Reverend Alston, what are your thoughts about that? Did you start a church because you were mad nobody would call you?
Absolutely not. Matter of fact, I was completely against this concept, right, of church planting. I really think that because it's something that we've seen so long, right? Mm-hmm. Of people who get mad and leave a church and split a church, or people even who get put out of churches and go start churches, or people who can't get a church and go, and I really think we have to revert back to, what are you called to? Yeah. What are you called to? Because in the Black church, for so long, I feel like we have idolized being the pastor, that secondary leadership has not even been, correctly valued for so long, right? And so, I can even share in a part of a denomination that I was a part of a while back, like, you saying that you were going to be an associate minister, right? They're trying to push you to go pastor churches. But what if you're not called to go and pastor? What if you're called to be a number 2 and not be a number 1, or whatever the case might be? So I think that's also another result, because when you're not called to it and you go and it doesn't work out, well, you were pushed out here now. So now you have to have a backstory to go with this story, right? And you got to create your narrative against that narrative and all of that. So I think the trend is dangerous. I think another thing is we have to make sure people who are starting churches have been okayed by pastors who are their pastor. right? I think that is important. My pastor, prime example, he knew I had this vision. He knew this was something. This was something we communicated, and something. Although my pastor, shout out to District Elder Anthony Love in Greensboro, North Carolina. But even though my pastor had not started a church, this was still a conversation between me and him. And I said, Pastor, this is what the Lord is saying. And he said, I hear you. He said, however, bring me more information. Bring me more information. You know, I hear that this is your vision, and I hear, but bring me something that we can put on paper, right? Let's have something outlined, because I'm not going to throw my son out to the wolves, right? And I think that's important. And it's interesting because even though my pastor had okayed me, right, I have still heard rumors in the area, right? They said that he left and he wanted to split that church, or my home church actually is a city right over from the city we're launching, right? That I grew up in as a kid. And the first conversations that I was hearing was, oh, he's trying to split his home church. And what I really would love to suggest to our Black community, really, specifically in reference to our churches, is that just because someone starts a church doesn't mean they didn't like where they were at. Right. It doesn't mean that they had issues with that church. It doesn't mean that things were going sour. Sometimes God says things to people that other people won't like. And that's the reality, you know? And I think that that's one thing. I have actually physically dealt with this. I was accused by a pastor in the area of launching a church to split his church. And I wasn't confronted by him. I was confronted by a member of his church. And he said, you know, my members are attending your Bible study. And here's what I said, and this may be deviating just a little bit, but I want to say this as well. And hopefully this will free a church planter, because it really freed me. You can't control who's interested in your church. Can't control that. There are different people who will be interested. I have people who have came to our Bible studies and have joined our church who haven't been a part of churches. And then I have people who have came and they just like our church better than the church they were at. Now, it's not my goal to go steal members, but I'm not going to point you back to where you came from just when you're saying this is where I'm feeling God is calling me to. And so this kind of idea that suggests that we as church planters, you know, we got mad, we wanted to go launch a church. I feel like if you have conversations with genuine pastors who've launched churches, we'll echo, this wasn't our goal. This wasn't what we wanted, but this is where we are.
Yeah. And also that there are definitely people, that concept of you going to split a church, you know, that's always curious to me, you know, that people leave, people come and people go. Reverend Gabby, go ahead. I can tell you want to say something on this one before I get to the very last question. Go ahead.
Yeah, because this is such an important part of the conversation. I have a few things I want to say, but I'll say them quickly. The first being, whenever you start a church, you owe it to the pastors in that neighborhood to go and talk to them, to meet them, to connect with them, and to get to know them. And if they're not available to meet with you, you can't go running through the streets saying, well, I tried to meet with Pastor so-and-so one time, but they wouldn't meet with me, so they don't support me. Yeah. These pastors have to do the work they're already called to. Yeah. But I will say to you, one of the blessings of us when we began our church was that we already had relationships. We're in the borough of churches. Brooklyn is the borough of churches. And we already had relationships with all of the pastors that pastor the kinds of churches that people who would consider our church would also consider theirs. And we all built relationships. Well, we already had relationships, but we had clear conversations with them about what we were looking to do. And we said, listen, we are not looking to replace anything that's going on. We're simply giving an additional option in this tradition, right? But I will say this, I have to slightly disagree with you, Pastor Alston, and just share our approach to when we first began. We first began in 2018. In our preview year, we started our church in 2019. I had folks coming to me probably through about 2022 who I knew needed to go back to their home church. People who loved our preaching style, people who were under us when we were young adult pastors, people who were in their own home context but felt like their pastor wasn't moving them forward towards ministry or what have you. And I have sent so many folks back to their home environments and said, wait, before you come over here and ask I would ask XYZ questions of them and would realize they were just frustrated and just wanted to get a fresh slate. And I was like, no, go back to your pastor. Tell your pastor what you just told me. And on most of those occasions, they then would come back to me and say, I talked to Pastor so-and-so, and you know what, they're giving me an opportunity for this, so I'm going to stay here. Or they're giving me this opportunity, so I'm going to stay here. Or they explained to me why they didn't give me this opportunity. And so I just want to also say, because I've been in this a while, I've had many opportunities to quote unquote have people come under our fold, and I've sent them home. Because when you are starting a church, you have to be very sensitive to who God is calling to your church and who is just kind of frustrated with where they are, because they will bring the mess from where they were to where you are, and then they will leave you with more mess and go to their next place. And so not everyone, when they come to you with those sob stories, that's why you have to have a relationship with clergy in your region. Because I'll say to them, that don't sound like Pastor so-and-so. You want me to reach out to them? I've said to people, you want me to tell them you're coming over here? Oh, no, please don't call them. Oh, because we're scheduled to have lunch next week. So are you sure? Because I wouldn't feel right. And you begin to smoke people out, because people are human. And sometimes they see something new as an opportunity to reinvent themselves and to disrespect where they've been. And then they start chatter on the internet that your church is in reverse to this church. So I had to get that out, Doc, because we have to really protect the reputational standing of our congregations. And you will be able to discern as you talk to people, but we have to bring that discernment even as we're trying to build our own teams and source our own folks.
No doubt. No doubt. Let me, we are overtime already. I mean, this is what happens when the conversation is important and the conversation gets good. But in 10 seconds, just Dr. Hatcher, tell me just three things real quickly that you believe are the main thing church planters need.
And you mentioned beyond prayer, to know how to pivot, to know how to pilot, and to know how to perfect. And if you want me to add some meat, if I have time, I will. Pivot, pilot, and perfect. And you're right, Dr. Gabby. I sent members back and said, you could come and sit here, but this is not what you're supposed to do.
Okay, Reverend Alston, three things they need.
Patience, flexibility, and you need to know how to be humble. Those would be my three.
All right. Dr. Gabby, you closing us out. What's your three?
You need to be an organizer. You need to be a preacher. And you need to be a welcoming presence, hospitable.
All right. So I know that there are people who are going to be planting. I know that there are people who are thinking about it. And I know that there are people who are parts of teams, okay, who are thinking about what shall we do next. And there are also quite a number of pastors who are looking to plant campuses, okay? They're looking to plant campuses in other places. So you all have given us everything we needed. You've given us all of the perspectives. I so appreciate Reverend Alston, who brings us, I believe, a fresh look at this thing. And we are cheering for him and been checking out his Bible study. We're cheering him on. Dr. Hatcher is now in a building and just going strong. And Dr. Gabby and her husband, they've been on the journey. They're doing it. They are doing it. And so I can't thank each of you enough for giving us, sharing with us, giving your time. God bless all of you who joined in today. Thank you for hitting my Cash App. I appreciate that because I'm an independent scholar. Join me next Monday, February the 10th, as we talk about increasing and getting good curriculums for Black children in our churches. And last but not least, as I always say, share the video. It's not going to cost you anything. Share the video. There are people who need this information. God bless each of you. Hope you all have a marvelous week as we're getting through and going through what we're going through. God bless. Thank you, everybody.
Blessings on all of you.